Are we in business?
Yes, we're in business now.
Okay.
When you said you worked nights, how late at night did you have to work?
I'd work
During
all
the
night.
night? All night long?
I'd work all night. I'd go in at, I think I'd go in at 7,
Really?
or maybe it was 9.
Mhm.
And then I'd work till morning. Of course, there was a lot of mornings or nights that I slept with my pillow on the calculograph, you know, where you stamp the cards, because it was storming. And the automatic alarm would go on if I had it turned on, you know. So I'd sit there with my pillow on the calculograph and take a nap, you know, so that I could answer the phone and
Was there usually quite activity all night long?
sometimes you could sleep all night long.
Oh, sometimes you could sleep all night.
Because there was nobody, there was a bed, we had a nice bed there,
Mhm.
folding bed that you could fold up and get it out of the way. And so,
How many people worked there?
mm,
Or like you did? Like on the day shift, would there be 2 or 3, or just one person do all of it?
no, I think there was probably about, for relief and everything, I think there was probably 5 or 6 of us.
Oh, okay. Do you
And,
remember, can you tell me who the other gals, were they all women?
There was all girls, and there was one or two of them were gardener girls, but I can't remember their first names. And one of them was Lillian. Was their name White that had the restaurant?
Night.
Knight. That's what Lillian Knight worked. And the chief operator, her name was Alice.
Gibbons? Was it
No.
Gibbons? No.
She wasn't a Roscommon girl. She was from somewhere else, and
Well, that's okay, I just thought maybe you
she
might
used to
remember.
take a dip out of our income, out of our checks. Of course, she had it so that we were supposed to be paid with the cash. See,
Mhm.
well, she could take out what she wanted to.
Is that legal?
No,
Was
it
she
wasn't.
supposed to do that?
She was, so that they finally got rid of her because she stealing from us.
Well, I guess so.
So
What was the name of the phone company back then?
Tri-County.
Okay, and that was in 1930. How long did you work there, do you think?
Oh, I worked there even after I was married. So I must have worked probably 4 or 5 years.
Oh, okay. Great. Well, you knew what was going on in town then, didn't you?
A few things.
Yeah. And so when you and Cecil were married, where were you married?
We were married over at Houghton Lake.
Oh.
This man was a friend of his, and he'd been one of the lumbermans, and he was a preacher in their group, a Latter-day Saint,
Oh.
and his name was
That's okay. Did you and Cecil have your own place right away when you were married, or did you live with your folks, or what?
No, we lived with another couple. That was during the Depression,
Yeah, I remember
and
that.
it was really, it was tough, you know. And this fellow, his name was Harry Bobe, and
How do you spell that?
Bobe, I guess.
Okay.
And he had a woman that came up from Flint, and they weren't married, and they were so afraid they'd be caught, because then because she was be his common law wife, you know.
Mhm.
And so they put all the money that they had together and bought groceries. And then I didn't know all about it, but we all lived together. And we were looking after these cottages, one of the cottages that we lived in,
Oh.
for looking after them. And he also looked after a lot of cottages other than that one, you know, this bulb did.
In what lake, where are we now?
At Houghton Lake.
We're at Houghton Lake,
Mhm.
okay.
And so they would, we had been married quite a little while, because I know, and Cease had worked at different work, and about the only thing he could do up here that he could do was cut wood. So he used to cut a lot of wood and sell it to people, especially in the summertime, because when they came up here, they'd have cook stoves to cook their food on, you know.
Right,
So
sure.
so he would have a lot of cooked wood, and but
Then did you drive from Houghton Lake to Roscommon to the telephone for your job? Did you have your own car?
no.
How did you get to work?
Well, we did have a car, but sometimes my brother would take me if I
Oh, sure.
too, because if need be,
Mhm.
and if I did work after I had the children, I used to take, or when I had Pat, we used to leave her with my mother, because Cease was so afraid she wouldn't be all right, you know. So
Mhm.
I'd leave her with Mother and then pick her up when I went home. And
Okay, it says in 1931, fall of Ann Arbor. Did you move down to Ann Arbor right after you were married for a while?
no, and I can't understand what that was. I think
Oh,
that was
okay.
my father.
That's where your mother and dad went, maybe.
31, I think.
Mhm.
Well, my father had a mental breakdown,
Oh.
and
okay.
he was in Ann Arbor.
Oh, okay.
Hmm
That's probably what that's about.
He was there 6 weeks. Then came home, and he went to the doctor and told him there was something wrong with him, and he just couldn't figure it out. He just wasn't reacting right, you know.
Mhm.
And he and my mother went. And then when he came home from Ann Arbor, he went to, they sent him up to Traverse City. And he was away from home for years and years.
Oh, really? So your mother
She
struggled by herself?
Oh, she had struggled, just a desperate struggle.
Wow.
She and I bought the house because she and I would work, and I would help her with the laundry and everything, so she could.
That little house on 100, you mean?
And she paid $50 a year for that.
Oh.
That man was so kind to her, you know.
Mhm.
And I remember one time she lacked $5, and she was just, when he came to get it, and she told him, she said, I just haven't got it. He said, just don't worry about it. We'll see about it. He was awfully good to her, bless his heart.
Sure.
And because my father he would want to buy a place, but then he would back out of it.
Mhm.
And Mother, I don't know how many places, and finally this was the one that she just put her feet right down and said, this is it.
Mhm.
And I'm going to have it, you know, because years and years, it was a very hard life for my mother.
Mhm.
And she was such a wonderful person. It's just tragic, you know, how people have to live sometimes.
Mhm.
No one has it easy.
Right, but it's
Yeah.
hard to even imagine that in today's world.
Hmm
Yeah.
So,
So you had, Pat was your firstborn, and you lived in Prudenville then?
that was when we was living with this couple.
Oh, okay.
that-
Okay.
And
And then it says in the fall, the farm burned?
Mm-hmm.
What farm was that?
That was the Auldrich farm, and
Oh.
that was
Cecil's father?
yeah,
Okay.
north of just a short distance from Houghton Lake, there on the northeast side,
Okay.
and we were living there, and I was working then at the telephone office, and he took me to work, and he stopped. Talked to it was my dad or my brother or who it was, and when he got home, the whole inside of the house was on flames. We had a little dog in there, and he got the dog out, tried to, and we had an outdoor pump, so he got trying to get a pail to get water in it, you know. He had a dreadful time in the car. He jumped out of the car and left the car running, and it went until it got to where they used to make a furrow at the edge of the garden. There was a hole there.
Uh-huh.
And of course
Stopped
it
the car.
stalled the motor.
Thank goodness, huh?
Thank goodness for that, you know. He got the dog out, and he took the dog up to my mother's, and I was working. And when I got, and his brother had been going with a girl, and he was killed. And so she was from Chicago, and she had had a child. Of course, I was after he died, because he died a lot earlier than that. And she had a little girl older than Pat, and she came with, you never seen the amount of clothes, just a great big basket of beautiful clothes. Some of them looked like they'd never been worn.
Oh, my.
And of course they were in this fire, you know.
Oh.
And shoes and overshoes and all sorts of things, you know. Anyway, in the new bed we had for her and everything, it just went.
Lost
you know.
all of it.
Mm-hmm. But we were fortunate, because we were. I had taken Cisa's working clothes for the winter up to my mother's and washed them. That's the only way I washed, and I'd packed them into a box, and they were at my mother's. So he had his working clothes. That was a godsend to us, you know.
Sure.
And I think I had some for myself and for Pat, because I did my laundry there too, you know. So, but I didn't have all of it, of course. But anyway, we got by.
But you weren't living at the farm when it burned.
We'd been living there.
Or
yeah.
you had been. You had left the
we
the cabin with the Hobes,
Mm-hmm.
and you had moved to the
Mm-hmm.
to his father's place.
Mm-hmm.
Was the stepmother out of the picture by then?
Yes. Well, she had her store down.
She had her own place.
Mhm.
Okay.
She had her own
Was
place.
his father still living?
No,
You-
he was gone.
Oh, okay.
He'd
So
been
you
gone.
were living there yourselves.
Mm-hmm. See, he went and, what was it, oh, I can't say right now what it was. It was quite a while before that he died.
Oh, was he had passed away already by the time you were married?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay.
Mhm. Yeah. So,
So you really lost everything in that fire.
mm-hmm.
Was the house ever rebuilt, or what happened?
No, nothing. No, not
No.
rebuilt at all.
Where did you go then?
Oh, then my brother was moving out of Marl Lake. He and his wife had lived at Marl Lake, and they were moving. He'd built a house for them. And so we went and looked after Marl Lake.
Oh.
Mm-hmm. So we were there.
Well, that had to be a neat place. Was there woods around it yet, or had that all been
Lots,
cut?
lots of woods
Lot of
around it and
woods?
everything. Mhm. It was, and at the farm there wasn't a tree or anything, you know, because it was all farm.
Mm-hmm.
And when we got to Marl Lake, here's trees all around. It was just a
Lovely.
different place entirely, you
Sure.
know. And I remember Peter was he was little when we moved there, and everything was new, and he was very sensitive about it. And one time, had gotten them ready for bed, and I always rocked him. And I was rocking.
I bet you did.
I was rocking him, you know. I was an awful mother, I guess. My daughter, her sister-in-law, she didn't think I was a very good mother.
Why not?
She never had any children, you know.
Oh, that's why she didn't know.
She didn't know I said, you know, if you had children and they'd had two heads, you'd have loved them. It wouldn't have mattered. I said,
right.
if they'd been your children, you'd have loved them.
Mm-hmm.
She couldn't, because they had
Did she think you spoiled your children because you were rocking them so much? Mm-hmm.
And I was rocking him, and we didn't have a cat, but we had some wood that had to be moved, and these people a fellow from Roscommon, Bill Henderson, had a pickup, and he moved this wood up for us. So I guess it was probably 8 or 10 cords of it piled up there. And there was a cat in it, and they caught this cat. They thought it was our cat. It was the gardener's cats. They lived over in the next
section, huh?
away from us, yes. And the kids were always after the kittens, so the cat brought them over and hid them in this wood pile. And of course, I didn't know they were there, so that was okay. They brought this cat because they thought it was mine, so I did put it up in the attic because there was mice there. And we kept it. And we always called her Tabby. And I don't know how many kittens she had. And of course, we'd have to get rid of them and everything. But she was the best cat you ever knew. She just was so good and so one time I was rocking Peter to sleep, and the front door, it would vibrate, like, you know,
Rattled in the wind.
Rattled a little, and the doorknob moved, and he seen it, you know. Mom, something's at the door. I said, oh, it's all right. And it was this cat. And there was a light or a little window in the door. Mm-hmm. Pretty soon this cat gets up there and peeks in the window, and he seen the cat. I said, now you see who's at that door? He said, oh, Mother, how did she know? I said, well, she wanted in, that's why.
Uh-huh.
Isn't that cute?
That is.
That's the cutest thing. So, and they always loved cats and dogs. I remember one time they had kittens, and Mr. Stadler came up because he owned part of Marl Lake. You see, he'd been in a corporation that owned that. And another man, his name was Fields. He was from the state. I don't know what they were up there about, but anyway, these kids sold each one of them a cat for 50 cents. Mr.
How long did you stay at Marl Lake? And was that property that your brother had owned?
No, he'd been a caretaker there too.
Oh, okay.
It had been, in fact, it had been a corporation. It was, in fact, the men had put down, had men, of course my brother had been one of them that worked on it. They drove boards into the earth because it's part of Marl, you see, so it was easy to drive these boards down. They were going to have a muskrat farm, and then they left them up out of the water about so far, and then they
Or a foot or so?
put chicken wire on top of that so they couldn't get out, see. They were going to raise muskrat, and they did, and But one of the guys that was looking after it, that was before my brother started working there, he made off with some of the rats.
With the furs, huh?
With the furs, you see. So that went to pot. So so it was just still a corporation, but nothing was being done with it when we lived there.
Oh.
And sometimes people would come up, and they used to come up usually for Labor Day, and they'd get a bunch of chickens, and I had to cook chicken
Excuse me.
on a wood stove for that bunch of people, 20
my
people.
Gosh. Where did they stay? Did they bring tents?
There was a big
Lodge?
chicken coop that was built over in the woods back there. It had 3 rooms in it and was never used for chickens. So the adults would go out there and sleep. And can you imagine?
No.
They had 2 bedrooms in their house, and it was nice. It was
Well, was this place the only place on Mar Lake? Because that's not developed.
No, that's all
That
the
was
people
the
that
only
was
one
there.
there, okay.
And of course it was private, so we didn't. Cease always patrolled it. They couldn't have any hunting on there or anything, And he had to be bonded so he could carry a gun, and because there was people that was determined they were going to come in there and shoot ducks and stuff like that, This one old fellow he had a place on Higgins Lake, and he came in one time and he brought in a blind. It was built to sit in the water, but of course they'd anchor it, and he was going to be all set to hunt ducks in there, and got all set and everything. In the morning he was going to start. Cease went out and told him to haul it out or he's going to set fire to it, And the guy, he was so mad. So
Cease was paid by the corporation that owned all this. And where was that from?
that was from Detroit.
Detroit. Okay. Great. So how long did you stay there?
Oh. From then on until I went to my own house. What was that?
Well, it says Peter was born in 34, and then you lived on the farm 35 and 36.
Yeah.
You went back to the Auldrich farm, you mean?
We lived in the summer house.
Oh, okay. How big a place
It was
that?
big. It was probably, I think it was probably about 24 by 24. It was a big place, and then Cease added a end on it there and pulled another building around and got it set there. Hooked it on, and that was the kitchen. And then we had 2 bedrooms. We had curtains up for that,
Sure.
And his aunt sent old rugs up, old carpets up, so we had carpets on the floor. We were like the rich,
Well, sure. The rich and famous.
Yeah. So, and we had this kitchen. I know one time his sister and her husband, well, the 2 sisters, one was from Chicago, and she was married to a doctor. It was Conrad was their name.
Okay.
Grace and Arthur. And you can write on that. There's more.
Oh, that's okay. I'm
There's
just taking some
loose
notes.
paper in there somewhere too.
Yeah, I brought some.
And Arthur and Grace they all came up at Christmas time.
And they all stayed with you?
Well, they went down to Bria's and stayed, because they came there in the summertime. And so they came there and went and stayed to Bria's, and then drove over to our place for meals. And I made a fruit cake, and of all things, I put icing on it. I didn't know beans about it, but
It's all right, it's soaked in.
Yeah. But anyway, we enjoyed it. And goodness gracious, we had this old cook stove. I remember it was a regular cook stove with probably, six
For wood.
six, yeah, for 6 burners and the reservoir and everything. And we had was taking the turkey out of the oven, and one of them almost dropped it. And taking it out of the pan to put it on a platter, and they almost dropped it. And then we had to get the pan out there and onto the stove so we could make the gravy, and everything. It was fun. It was just great fun.
Well, that was nice. That was a fairly good sized place for you to live then, really.
It was a nice place for us to
Sure.
live.
How long did you live there?
Dear. We lived there till we moved up. Let's see, till we moved to Mara Lake to look after the place there.
Oh, okay, that was before you went to Marl Lake.
Mhm.
Okay.
And then when we left Mara Lake, we moved here to our own place.
And that is here?
Mhm.
This house?
It was different though. It was just a cottage when we first bought it, and
You lived at Marl Lake until 1964?
mhm,
So you were there like almost 30 years?
about 30 years.
Really?
Mhm. Yeah.
Wow. So tell us about your children. We have Bill and Peter. Then who was next?
Well, it was Pat and Peter were my children.
Oh, I'm sorry. Pat was the first one.
Mm-hmm. Then she was born at Houghton Lake at Dr. Sturge's. He had a couple of rooms in his house, and a couple of 3 rooms, and one of his daughters was a nurse, and she used to look after people.
Oh.
And so I was there when I had Pat. And then I was supposed to have a lady that was going to look after me when I had Peter, and she had something wrong with her eyes and couldn't, so I had Peter at my mother's house.
Oh.
And it was June, and it was hot as all get out. And when the doctor came, I was behind the door. And he said, "What in the world are you doing behind the door?" And I said, "I was trying to take a sponge bath because I was so warm."
Oh.
Oh dear, oh dear. So then we lived at Mara Lake when we had Martha too.
Okay. When was Martha born? Do you remember? What year?
What in the world was it? I just had it. Peter was Sidney William. He's not Peter at all. He's just,
Oh, he isn't?
He's Sidney William. He was born June the 3rd,
Uh-huh.
1934.
Okay.
And Martha Jane was born March 23rd, 1942.
Okay.
And Leo was born June the 11th, 1946.
Well, that's a very nice family.
Mm-hmm.
What was Pat's full name?
Patricia Ann.
She was February 21st, 1932?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Great. How did Peter get the nickname?
I was at my mother's when he was born, and Pat came in. She was out with my father, and she came in and she said, "Oh, Grandma, is that my little Peter Pumpkin?"
Oh.
And of course, that he got Peter.
Yeah.
Isn't
From his
that-
big sister.
Isn't that just awful?
Peter Pumpkin.
Yeah. These kids.
So when did you start working at the school? Or what was your next job after you worked at the telephone office and you raised your family?
Mm-hmm. And I used to, while I was raising my family, my mother and I and my sister-in-law used to clean cottages in the spring.
Okay, tell us your sister-in-law's name.
Eula Apps,
Oh, okay.
Y-U-L-A,
Mm-hmm.
and she had 4 or 5 children, but we worked them in, and
You worked as a team then, the three of you?
the 3 of us, and sometimes we'd, then sometimes if we didn't work, we'd keep the children so the others could work, you know, or something, whichever happened. And then I don't even remember. I worked in different places, I know. And when I was at Stadler's, or at Marl Lake, I cooked for these people when they would come up, you know. And
So people came up for recreation there, and they had a place to stay separate from yours. And you would cook, then would they come?
I would go over to their house and cook.
Oh, you would go to their house and cook.
And my daughter, the one that was with me,
Martha.
Martha, she has a little organ about this, it's about this wide.
About 2 feet?
And pedaled, you know. And they had it at Marl Lake, and they would be up there, and Mr. Stadler would drink quite a bit sometimes, and so he'd sit in a chair afterwards, a big high-back chair, and fall asleep. And this organ was all over in the corner behind this chair, and she'd go over there and play it, you know, and I'd scoot her out of there. And one day he said to me, "You know, she likes to play that organ, and don't scoot her out." He said, "She can play that anytime she wants to." And I said, "Well, you were sleeping. It don't matter. You just let her play."
Now, who was Mr. Stadler?
That was the people that were
came.
there.
Okay.
Some of them that
from
came.
Detroit or wherever.
Yeah, he was a businessman from down there. And it was so funny because they just spoiled my kids, that's all.
Well, that was nice. They deserved it.
They did, because, and I would, one time they had guests there with them, and they had, I don't know if you ever do it or not, to take a big piece of thick round steak, and then you put like a dressing in it, or vegetables, or whatever you want to, and roll it up. And then you cook it, and I would cook them in tomato sauce, you know. And
I know you were a wonderful cook.
so when
You are a wonderful cook.
so when it was done, why, I could tell because I tested, you know. And that old stove used to just cook like mad, you know. And it was a good oven, And so you knew that things were going to cook well. And this one lady, her name was Martha. That's terrible. She'd had a cancer operation, and she had her arm would swell. She'd had the breast removed, but her arm used to swell, and so she always thought that I named Martha for her. I didn't tell her the difference because I didn't want to
Disappoint her.
hurt her feelings, you know.
Sure.
But it was another lady that I named her for, and but anyway. I told her this roast was ready, and this lady said, "Why, it can't be done." Of course, she cooked on an electric stove, I suppose, and the setting and everything. And your temperatures varies, you know, on the wood stove. That was an awfully good stove anyway. So they finally came out and checked it, you know, and so it was ready.
You knew it was ready, didn't you?
I knew it was ready, you know.
Sure.
Had all the rest of the things ready to go with it. And
So when did you start working at the schools?
Isn't that funny? I should remember that. Mr. Holtz called me, and he wanted to know if I could cook for that many kids, you know. And I said, "How many?" He said, 400. And I said, "Well, if the food is there, I can cook it." And but I got right in there, and here I am. I have to buy the food, and I made the menus, and cooked all the food and everything, you know. And he had a secretary, and I was going to say her name, and I can't. Anyway, they kept track of my bills from the stuff I bought and everything. And of course, I didn't buy little bits. You know, I'd buy enough to last a month or so. And so we started out in September, and in November we'd made money enough that we were out of the hole. We didn't owe anybody. We were making money.
He was impressed. You did very well.
And they were so happy about it. And of course, then when Mr. Lounge come, he put it all into the general fund. He didn't keep it separate.
Oh.
But I did ask his secretary a couple of times, and she told me where we were, and I knew I was doing all right, you know.
Sure.
But it was funny because I worked at the, in the summertime, I worked at the Burning Oaks
Oh, did you?
Country Club, you know. And I used to have 2 or 3 kinds of meat, and then all the vegetables, and also soup and stuff like that, you know. And I had it open all summer, and the people, resorters came. They didn't come to play golf or anything. They just came to
For
eat.
dinner. Sure. They knew the food was good. Tell me about your 4th grade camp memories.
Oh, that was wonderful. I loved that. I like kids anyway. And I would, of course, I was the food manager and everything, so I had to buy enough on hand to go to camp, and enough to keep the camp going, or the school going. And so the first year or two, I took the chicken and cooked it there. But then I got so that I would have it cooked and frozen.
Oh,
and,
ahead of time.
And we could take it, you know, and then it would be
You know,
ready.
you and Jack Bigger made some pretty good pancakes.
Oh, we made pancakes like nobody's business.
You sure did. They were wonderful.
He loved doing that, you know, and I loved it too. We both
Yeah, I
enjoyed
know
it.
we all had a good time
Oh,
doing
yes,
that.
we
It
had
was
wonderful
fun. Yeah,
times.
it
It
was.
was just wonderful.
How many years did you do fourth grade camp, do you know?
I think one time, because I used to go for separate for St. Helen when we first, because our group was too big.
Yeah.
I think I counted 18 times.
Did you?
Mhm,
Oh,
that I went
wonderful.
to camp. And I just enjoyed every minute of it, you know.
Oh, sure.
And I think it was Martha that just reminded me that I had to go to the hospital and have an operation. And I'd just been out of that, I think she said 6 weeks when I went off to camp.
Off to camp. Couldn't miss camp.
I remember that time because I know I couldn't lift.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd have to have them get the stuff out of the freezer for me. And
Sure. Well, there was plenty of help there.
oh, it was always good help.
Yeah.
Wonderful
Yeah,
times.
we had good
Just
times.
wonderful times. So,
Well, that was nice. Well, how many grandchildren do you have?
goodness gracious.
Oh dear, I shouldn't ask that, huh?
Well, Pat had 7 or 8 children.
Oh, wow.
My daughter Pat had 8 children.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see what I think that probably there's 6 grandchildren there.
Well, 6 great-grandchildren?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And
And Pete has how many?
they didn't have any children.
Oh, he doesn't
They'd
have
never
any.
had any children.
Okay.
They went
And Martha has?
and Martha had 2.
Mm-hmm. And Leah?
And she had, Martha has 7.
Grandchildren.
So those are great grandchildren.
Yeah. And Leah has how many?
And Leah has 1 daughter. She's 17 this September.
Oh, okay, so.
Mm-hmm.
Well, how nice. So you have 11 grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's nice. How, do you mind saying how old you were when you finally quit cooking at the school? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I was 65.
Where you quit when
'Cause
you were
they used to have
65?
a-
But you went to camp, you kept going to camp though,
Mm-hmm.
after that, didn't you?
And then after that, why, I catered weddings.
Oh.
And I did several big weddings, and I'd fix all the food. I'd have my daughter help me put the meat onto the trays and things like that, because I'm not, I can't do anything fancy.
Oh.
I'm just a plain person. And but I used to bake the bread for the stuff. I baked the first dinner I cooked was for what in the world? It was over by Prudenville, and I baked 18 loaves of bread. I made some sourdough bread too,
Oh.
and I know I had the car just loaded with stuff
I bet you did.
in it, you know, and so we went over to Prudenville. I think it was over to one of the what's that big place called? It was a great big building, I know, and we set everything up, and then they served themselves.
Oh, like a buffet.
Mm-hmm. We just put it up, and think we served 700 that time. And
You sure stayed out of trouble, didn't you?
oh, I did. I really did. I'd sit up in the evening and peel potatoes. And peel a whole 100 pounds of potatoes, you know, to make potato salad. And
Marvelous. Now, not that we're going to run out of time here. We have to come to an end. What did Cecil do? He was caretaker at Morrow Lake. Was that his only job then in your other years, or what?
He worked on the highway.
Oh, he worked for the state or the county?
The county.
For the county.
Drove trucks and snow plowed and all sorts of things like that.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
he did that for years. And
Did he retire from that, or how
No.
long has he been gone?
no, he died in the 50s.
Oh, he did. You've been a widow a long time.
And
So you were left with fairly young children, too?
I
then?
had 2 daughters. Martha
That were
was
still home.
13 and Leah was 9 when their father died.
Wow.
And of course I got some Social Security, but I still went on working because we
You
were
needed
used
to.
because we always had to have a car and
Sure.
things like that. And the kids had to go to things. They didn't go to everything, but the important things, they always had to go to school for those, you know.
Sure.
So, and I wanted them to have as good a life as I could
Why, sure.
provide for them.
Well, that was nice.
They were,
Well, we certainly thank you for your wonderful history of your family being
they were a great
going
gift to
through
me.
the lumber company, all your experience as a young girl, though, in
Yeah.
all the moving of your family.
Oh,
It's
yes.
amazing
It was really
just
something.
to survive.
And when we were cutting the cedar boughs, we sometimes moved 2 or 3 times in a year because we'd have to go where we could get good
Sure,
cutting, you know.
Sure.
And
Well, we thank you very much.
you're welcome.
It's been very nice.
You're very
If
welcome.
If you think any more that you think we need to know, you'll have to call us up.
Okay.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.